Hello and welcome to Stories and Lessons. This is Tim Winicke with Empowered Change Counseling and Education. In our fourth episode, I'm going to continue the story about basic training and some of the lessons and things that happened there that radiate out into the rest of my life. Last time, we talked about the knowledge going in that I had, being older than the majority of people around me, the friends and resources I used to make sure I was set up as possible for the basic experience, and how I learned to be humble so that I could learn what I needed to learn and become part of the team that would become my Air Force family. In today's episode, I want to continue with that story and talk about what I gave to that team and why that was important. So I told you how I came into basic and was generally kind of unhealthy physically, had some struggles being a little bit older than everybody else and being out of shape, and the support that one of the team members I had gave me getting through an injury at the end. That was all incredibly valuable to me, but none of it would have happened if I hadn't figured out how to join with these folks and leverage that knowledge and experience I had for the betterment of the group. So, following up with some of the advice I got from my friends about not standing out, that put me in a bit of an awkward position. Almost everywhere else that I had gone and had purpose in, I stepped up for some kind of leadership. And here was a situation where I really couldn't do that and learn how to be the follower I needed to be in the military. So to that end, I really struggled at first on how to find that balance between being humble and leveraging my skills. It all ended up coming together in a really kind of strange way. So the first job that the training cadre tried to give me was something called chow runner. And the chow runner at basic training in the Air Force is the person that most often interacts with the training cadre. Whenever the group shows up for a meal, the chow runner marches in and follows a procedure to announce the flight to what was called the snake pit. And that is essentially where the different training instructors sit at a table and wait to watch everyone go by and eat. And their whole purpose for being there is to stress you out while you eat, and I think have a little fun while doing it. So I knew that that job was going to give me a lot more exposure to the training cadre than was advisable. My friends before going to basic had made it very clear that I wanted to stay under the radar, and I couldn't think of a worse way to do that short of being the flight leader than taking this job on. So I purposefully failed. I had had lots of experience doing public speaking. It's been something I've been doing since I was 20 years old, and I made sure to stumble, mess up the lines, and even stutter in fear in front of the snake pit to make sure that they wouldn't have me do this job. And of course, this made them very angry, and so when they fired me from that, they put me in charge of cleaning the latrine. I was now going to be what is lovingly called the latrine queen for the flight. And when that happened, it didn't bother me. I was like, I've cleaned toilets before. I've worked in fast food. This isn't going to be a thing. And it had its challenges, right? There's 60 guys using a single set of toilets in a hurry. So let's just say that there was often a mess to clean up. But one of the things I noticed early on was for the Air Force, the only door in the squadron bay is on the bathroom. So to give you a picture of what an average kind of day looks like in basic training, anytime that the training cadre comes into the squadron area where everybody sleeps with the bunk beds and all that, they bring chaos. It's their job to keep you on your toes, to create stress, throw things around, scream at people, make demands, or just quietly stalk through and glare around the room as everybody freezes and wonders what's going to happen next. Being in the latrine, I had a door. I had a little small buffer between the general chaos of the squadron and my little space that I had. And yeah, they'd come through the latrine. Absolutely. They'd come through and belittle us for being on latrine duty. They'd come through and make the same kinds of demands and standards that they had anywhere else. But we weren't exposed into the open air for all of the abuse that they were putting out to the entire flight. And there was some comfort there for me. But what I also recognized fairly quickly is the latrine duty was a punishment duty. So what would happen for the rest of my time at basic, anytime another flight member wouldn't achieve a standard or needed to be punished on publicly shamed, they were sent to help clean the latrine. They were sent to me. And that put me in a really oddly powerful position, because these were people that were coming in angry, frustrated, upset, dejected, and I was in a position to help kind of soothe them and to take care of them a little bit. And that was a role that I valued my whole life. So inevitably, one of my flight members would come in dejected, sometimes in tears, and just being really angry. And I would briefly comfort them. Usually the only thing it took was, hey, I want you to just listen for a second. Listen to that. What do you hear? Drill sergeant screaming. Yeah, but you notice how it's a little quieter with that door? Here's your brush, man. Go scrub that toilet. And that set me up pretty early on as almost like the big brother of the flight. In the previous episode, I was one of the oldest. I looked back and it turns out I am the oldest person from my basic flight. I think the next oldest guy I had beat by 6 months. So it really set me up to be in a position not of leadership per se, but of mentorship. And within the first week and a half of basic, the different element leaders, the dorm chief, they would come to me and they would confide in me. And we would talk about who we were worried about in the flight, how to reach them, how to support the people that need it, who was injured, who was sick, and how to make sure the team did what it needed to do. And this was everything that I'd been missing. Since having graduated college and losing all direction and purpose, I had been running around in this depressed haze. I couldn't figure out what my purpose was going to be, what I needed to feel fulfilled, and how to connect with people when I didn't have those needs met. Before I went to basic, I had trouble even dating. Either I date women who didn't have much in the way of professional ambition and couldn't relate to them, or the women that I would find that did have professional ambition and drive, I couldn't figure out why they were with a guy like me. Now I was starting to get a clearer picture. I needed to be of service. I needed to help and be part of something bigger than myself. And the Air Force was going to be a way to do that. The other thing that allowed me to do was leverage my life experience while not stealing the limelight, while not being the authority leader. It allowed me to help be the moral leader for the group. And that was foundational for me as well. And it led to my career taking on being victims advocates for sexual assault survivors. It led to me winning numerous awards for team building and allowed me to be a standout uniform member in most of the units I served in. And it all started with getting thrown on a duty to clean toilets. I think it's hilarious when I look back at my life how the most ridiculous things lead to the biggest moments that are going to carry. The other thing that I realized fairly quickly is that the Air Force basic training had an academic component to it that no one really told me about before going in. And I should have known. The modern military is really more of a technical college. There's no job in the military that does not take significant technical skill and knowledge. And to get you ready for that, there is a basic academic test that you take at the end of basic training. And if you fail it 3 times, you are kicked out of the Air Force despite making it through all other aspects of basic. Now, I got through my community college experience having never read a book before going to college and having a pretty significant reading disability. So I knew some tricks to help people later in life figure out how to do academic reading and memorization. And it turned out that that was a really good thing to have. 3 of the guys in our basic flight could barely read. One of them was pretty disabled. I don't know what his disability was, but it was significant. And he had to probably put in 6 times the amount of effort that anybody else did to memorize the things he needed to memorize to pass his test. Sweet guy, passionate for the group, and just slow. He was just slow. The other 2 they couldn't have been more different. One of them was a white guy from the rural areas who didn't have an opportunity to go to high school because of his family and where he lived, and never was exposed to reading. He was incredibly bright. He had just never had access to something as laudable as a book, which I had never come across in my life. The other guy was a black guy from an inner city who had a rough family life and had a violent, fearful high school experience. And the 2 of them were great guys, and both of them helped me on the physical end. They were the ones that yelled at me to keep pushing despite my tears through my injury, comforted me afterwards, told me I was going to get through it. And I had a skill set that I could give back to them. I knew what it meant to try to scramble to figure out how to remember something out of a book when you've never seen one. I knew how hard it can be to pick up a skill under stress. And I made it my mission to help everyone in the flight make it through the academic portion of basic. Now, I don't want to say that the academic requirements of basic training are astoundingly difficult in the scale of things. They're not. But if it's a skill you've never had before, it's going to be hard, especially in a situation where you're probably sleeping less than 4 hours a night and have been under constant stress and ridicule for the last month or and a half of your life. Most flights, as it turns out, have 2 or 3 failures of the first attempt at taking the test. Very rarely do they have someone who fails the requisite 3 times to get kicked out, but it's pretty common to have a few folks fail on that first test. Our flight had no failures. Every single one of us passed the academic portion, including the 3 guys that had never had any access or ability to do so before this experience. And I realized that my academic background and the struggles I'd overcome to have that education and background were going to be useful in my career. There were going to be other people that came from lives that academics and book learning weren't part of their experience, just like I had been at their age. And it gave me a passion for teaching. A good teacher has at least 3 different ways to explain how to do something. And good Lord, for reading books and memorizing material, I had to learn 5 different ways to make it through college. And thank God for that. When I started grad school, I was unready for the 400 pages a week of academic reading, but this experience in basics started this confidence that I could do it. And it made it so that later on in my career, anytime I was put in charge of anyone's training, they tended to certify early and they tended to certify with honors. When I went through my sergeant's course, I followed a similar path, and none of my guys failed their test. Every single one of us made it through a difficult competitive school. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gotten my start in basic training with 3 bright, wonderful men that were my basic family, that helped me, which enabled me to help them. So, what I figured out was I have to be of service. Whatever field I'm in, whatever I'm doing, whatever team I'm on, if I don't see a way that I'm improving the team, if I'm giving something back, I have a really hard time learning from those folks. Even in times I really shouldn't be like that. I've had troubles with supervision where I felt like I wasn't making an impact or a connection with a supervisor, to learn from them, to learn the lessons I needed to from them. And this was the start of that. That need for service, I see it so often in my clients now. No matter who they are, what background they're coming from, whether it's their drive for money, their need for laudable career success, if they're to the point where money is now keeping score, which really for most of us, if you're making over 6 figures, money is about keeping score now. More often than not, what I find when we dig into that is the money is about safety and choice for their family and loved ones. For others, when it's how to be of service to their children, their families, their workplace, if they're frustrated in their career despite being successful on paper, it's because they don't feel connected by purpose and service. And basic training reminded me of that and built the theme that, unbeknownst to me at the time, was going to build out my entire professional life. So the lesson for this story is find a way to be of service to the people that are important to you. There's no better way to be able to lean into what they want to do for you. To connect is to support and be with people. You can't do that if all you're doing is taking, just like you can't do it if all you're doing is giving. I hope in hearing this story, as always, that my mistakes help you avoid them and make whole new ones. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Stories and Lessons. Again, this is Tim with Empowered Change, Counseling and Education. For more information about episodes or what I or our guests are doing out in the world, please visit www.empoweredchangece.com.